All right. Mackenzie,
Lamar.
you ever go to summer camp?
No, and this movies like this make me super jealous of summer camp. Maybe not this one
Because of all the
exactly,
heroin?
because of the heroin. Maybe not this one exactly, but other ones where they're like wholesome and you're in the
Yeah.
lake all the time. We had like one day camp I did once, but it was not at all the same energy or the same vibe at all. So yeah, I wish I had.
Plus, you were like
Did
a big
you?
time swimmer too, right? So you probably
Yes.
would love, super jealous of the lakes and whatnot in these.
Yeah, I was a competitive swimmer for a long time. So, like, I actually had a dream to swim across a lake and never did that. Like, I'm not a huge lake, obviously, but, like a summer camp kind of lake. And no, never happened. But,
Okay.
maybe I need to do that now. Who knows?
I mean, there are adult summer. That is a thing now. I have friends that go to adult
I've
summer camps, and
heard of
apparently they're a
that.
blast. So,
I think Alamo hosts one, actually, or they
well,
used to.
we
They
need
do
to look into
everything.
it maybe for next summer. Then it might already be past. But I was gonna
Did
say
you?
so I did. I wanted to say first that I feel like the movie ratio of really fun summer camps versus like summer camps where
Real
people
life.
get killed by slasher villains is like 50-50. So like just there were as many films inspiring me to go to summer camp as a kid as terrifying me for never wanting to go to summer camp. I'll say that. But I
Oh.
did go to summer camp and I went to Christian summer camp. So
Oh my
I
God.
I was pretty religious from probably around like fifth grade until right near the end of high school, like junior, senior year of high school. And I think two different summers I went to a week long Christian summer camp, which was
Oof.
honestly pretty damn fun because
Listen,
it's
I was in youth
still,
group, so yes, it,
yeah,
it can be fun to hang out with your homies at church camp, I would imagine.
yes. And spoiler, it's still just a bunch of horny teenagers. It's just
Right,
here you're doing a lot of praying to apologize for being as horny as you are.
right. You're
But so
being
I did,
shamed for the feelings you're having, is what it
So
is.
yeah. So it was a good time spending a few days there, experiencing the pride and the shame of it. But yeah, I do miss some of those days. I don't miss hellfire and brimstone and thinking I was gonna burn perpetually. But we don't have to go down that rabbit hole today. We'll save religion for I don't know, one of the October episodes. We do like The
Listen,
Exorcist or something.
I didn't go to Christian summer camp, but I had the same religious phase as well. I feel like
Hmm.
we need a cigarette and a different pod for that. But anyway, yes, I agree. It can still be super fun. But did you do these kinds of activities like like the classic summer camp stuff, like the canoeing and the archery and the crafting? Like, is that would
I
do they still
feel
have
like
all of that?
this was mostly I think we were between like the ages of 15 and 18, so it was less of the child like arts
Okay.
and crafts and stuff. There was like sports and
Okay.
different things like that, but it wasn't a ton of the stereotypical, I guess, summer camp
Got it.
activities. Never did
Mm.
those.
Okay. Well, now I'm less intrigued. Thanks for that.
It's okay,
Cool.
we'll live vicariously through this movie today then.
There we go. Well, hello, folks. Welcome back to We Drink and We Watch Things. I'm Mackenzie.
I'm wet hot American Lamar.
Oh, God. I'm not going to dig deep into that. Okay. So, today, if you couldn't tell, we're continuing our month of summer fun with,
Hmm.
I wouldn't say a classic, but perhaps a cult classic,
Yeah.
Wet Hot American Summer.
And I'm going to
As
come right out and say I owe this film an apology because, to your point, it's not a classic, but I saw this when I was probably 17 or so. And at that point, I was not ready for this type of comedy yet, I think, because
mm,
at that age, my favorite comedy film was probably like Dude, Where's My Car or Saving Silverman, something really fucking stupid looking back.
I mean, isn't
But
that still your favorite comedy? Don't
it's
lie.
in the top two. But this film I saw way too early and then never really gave it a second chance. I never
Yeah.
understood why it got brought back for the TV series and the eventual sequel. And
Hmm.
now I get it because it's not a perfect film by any means, but god damn it, is it funny.
Okay, so we're gonna have wildly different opinions here today. I can
Oh,
already tell.
geez.
So, but I also saw it too early, I think, as well. I just didn't get it. Back when I first saw it,
Same.
I just straight up didn't get it. I was way too young for it. And I remember just being like, is this how summer camp is? And then they have the whole like, we'll
You
get
thought
into
it
the
was a
specific
documentary?
scenes, but
Yeah.
I was just very, yeah, I don't know what it was. I did not get it, is the moral of the story.
Hmm.
But I get it now. I get lots of it now, I will say. But I also came away with the overarching question of why. Anyway, we'll get into all
Oh
of that.
boy, this is gonna be a
But
fun episode.
I know. Okay, but this is what the people have requested. Actually, fun fact: people recently were like, "I hate when you guys both love the movie and you
Yeah, they
just."
want a little bit of divisiveness. Yeah.
I don't know. So anyway, it sounds like we're gonna give the people what they want. But before we get into all of that, you mentioned choking on chili flakes, an outtake that you guys will hear later. But
If you
what
want
are
to
we
hear me
drinking?
almost die, stick around after the episode.
Exactly. Exactly.
But we are drinking a really tasty cocktail that Skylar cooked us up. I'm not going to give the entire recipe because there's a lot in this, but essentially
As
it's
is
like
typical with Skylar's cocktails.
yes, it's a spicy marg. Essentially, it's got some chili flakes in there. It's got some olive juice, which will throw you for a loop. But everything really goes together very well. And in this film, it's called Camp Firewood, so we are calling this Firewood Firewater because I think also Skylar said one of the characters in there is wearing a shirt that mentions like the
Yeah.
best firewater east of whatever. So
Which I will give
yeah.
him credit. I talked at length about the t-shirts in this film. So
Hmm.
that's how he went down that rabbit hole. But yeah, it's delicious. So cheers.
Cheers.
It is really good and it's dangerous though. It is a little, I mean, I can see how you could, if you get one of these, he also did my chili flakes pretty chunky. So we might have another choking outtake for you here shortly. Who knows?
Who knows how many times we'll cheat death today?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, shout out to Skylar and Craft World for our lovely cocktail.
Yeah, follow
But
them too.
yeah, follow them too. Exactly. We will do the basics as we do per usual. What do you think, Lamar? Should we have a spoiler free? It's been a hot minute. I feel like
I
we should
think
just blow
that
and go.
I think before we get into spoilers, let's do the cast and everything, but I want to hear some of your take on why you didn't have as good of a time as me, I guess, watching this.
Okay.
And then I
Okay.
think we can go straight into spoilers, but I want to get that take first because I feel like I've already said my piece.
Okay, I hear you. All right, well, let's do some basics, folks. This is Wet Hot American Summer coming in hot in 2001. And that also is not the year that I thought this came out. Like when I looked it up, I was like, this felt
Yeah.
older than that to me. I don't know what your take was, but
To
I was
me,
like,
it felt maybe it felt newer just because so many of the faces that you see in this are now
right.
everywhere. So I
Hmm.
associate them all with modern day comedy TV shows and films. Like you
Maybe.
can't everybody in this you've seen in the last 3 years in something that you're watching. So maybe it felt new.
100%.
I didn't realize it was 23 years old. It's bonkers.
Yeah, it is super old. Well, but I actually thought it was older. Like I said, I don't
Hmm.
know. I thought it was like in mid 90s for some reason. But anyways, 2001. It has a decent rating on IMDb, 6.5 out of 10. And then we have the Rotten Tomatoes score, which just cracks me up. The critics are 38%. That's it. And
This
then
is
the
not a
audience,
critic film.
not a critic film, although
No.
I felt like they would go a little bit deeper into the like the satire of it all. I don't know. Anyway, 75% audience. But I think that crept up because I actually read something and I wish I could remember, but it was like I read something that when it came out, the audience rating was also like
Yeah.
32, 31, something also equally bad. So
I
it has
think
like
it
climbed up the charts for
Yeah,
sure.
I think it wasn't just me and you. I think this movie was ahead of its
Head of
time.
its
It's
time.
weird because it pulls slightly from films like Airplane and Naked Gun. It has that sort of satirical
Mhm.
quality to it. It's a little
Mhm.
more on the nose with the summer camp vibe, but I do
Mhm.
think that dry satirical comedy, there wasn't really a place for it in 2001. Now we're 10, 20 years later and this stuff is landing a lot better. So I think in that time, that's
Yeah.
why that rating has crept up over time.
Yeah, and I think people have rediscovered it. There's a lot of people out there, they're like, "Oh, this is a cult classic." It definitely wasn't watched very much back then, so we'll get into it too. It just didn't get good ratings, people didn't go see it, but real quick, we'll go through you mentioned all the people in this. So director David Wayne, who actually I don't really know what else he did. I didn't even check.
So
What
he's
do you
a
think for him?
member of the State, which is an improv group that was formed in like the late 80s. And I think about 6 or 7 of the people in this cast were a member of that group. I think
Yep.
there's 11 or 12 of them. And you know them from everything. Like
Mhm.
I said,
Mhm.
if there's one of them in a movie, there's probably 3 other members there. Reno 911 is probably the TV show that most people are going to remember them all from, like the Thomas Lennons of the world and whatnot. But the one that I know David Wayne is Role Models, which also has Paul Rudd. And they've worked, Paul Rudd
Mm.
was not a member of the State, but he's been in like 5 different movies and multiple TV series where David Wayne has directed. So they got kind of a bromance going.
Yeah, well, I knew about the State. That's the it. If y'all didn't know, this is like NYU's improv group that
Hmm.
that actually, again, like a ton of people went through, and it was really cool. So, yeah, he's our director and one of our writers. Another writer is Michael Showalter. Same thing. Didn't actually check anything that he's done. Did you?
He directed The Big Sick, which came out 5 or 6 years
Oh, that's
ago with
right.
Kumail, and I actually really
I
enjoyed that one.
love that
Another
movie.
dry comedy, but that one was pretty good.
I love that movie, and I love Kumail Nanjiani, actually. He's awesome. But yeah, so those are our director writer combo dudes. We have a killer cast here, though.
Yeah.
And again, like part of what I think made this a bit of a cult classic, a lot of people going back and watching some of their faves in some of their early work, perhaps because
Yeah.
you have just a ton of people in here. And I actually don't even think I purposely selected the ones that I think most people will know, but there are a ton of people in this cast. So
Yeah, it's one of those ones where you're going to look and be, oh, it's that guy or it's that girl. It's like
yeah.
this person from this thing. It's a lot of that going on.
And no matter how big or small, because there's like a lot
Right.
of small roles that are big people later, right? And so
Yes.
we start with Janine Garofalo is the director of the camp, and she, as you all probably remember, was a voice in Ratatouille. We
I was
recently
gonna
talked
say,
about her.
I don't know that that's gonna continue being a trend that we're gonna randomly do one Janine Garofalo film every
I
month,
know.
but this is a nice run we're on.
I was
Maybe
gonna
we'll
say,
do Dogma one day. I don't know.
Yeah, so she's a Ratatouille, Dogma, Mystery Men, which again we talked about last time. But some of her newer stuff I realized I didn't really mention the last time we talked about her. So you may have seen her recently in like Billions and Younger, which are actually both wildly different shows, but also good. David Hyde Pierce, who I think everyone knows from Frasier, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody doesn't know he was in Frasier for forever. But he also did A Bug's Life voice.
I didn't know that until I saw that on IMDb. Which character was he? Was he the main ant?
No, I think he was like the wingman ant. I don't know. I haven't seen it in so long. You know what it is for me? I mix up ants and A Bug's Life all the time. Like who
It
was
doesn't
who in
help
which
that,
one.
yeah, there is an ant in Bug's Life. That's one of the
I
main
know
characters.
it's very confusing, and they came out the same fucking year. In case you weren't aware, and
They should have just like taken a hard line and been like, you know what? They're making that ants movie. We're not gonna have any ants in our fucking movie.
ants.
There's just
Fuck
no ants in this bug universe.
We got rid of all the ants. I'm the dark horse person who thinks that Ants was better than A Bug's Life. But anyway,
that's yeah. But I wanted to say I completely disagree with that. But I wanted to say that David Hyde Pierce in 2001 still feels like a pretty big get for this film. When you look at the majority of the cast is just friends of the filmmakers. David Hyde Pierce in 2001. I mean, he wasn't like A-list, but he's a pretty good get.
I think so. And he, for again, a kind of a small role. I mean, he amps up over the course of the film, but early on, he's kind of like just this weirdo guy who's a little bit ancillary to the story. But yeah, he's a pretty good get. And he plays an interesting character, which we'll get into. But Molly Shannon, who we all know from SNL fame, also superstar, Never Been Kissed. Serendipity, weirdly, that she played a really different character, but kind of a funny character. And then I was thinking of something recently, and maybe you can remember, and I just did a glance over her IMDb and I didn't see it, but I feel like she was in something recently where she played something a little bit heavier, a little bit atypical for her. And I cannot think of what it was, but I remember being like, okay, Molly, I need to figure out what that was.
I feel like it's a TV series because I know she's been on a few different TV shows recently. Wasn't she in... It's not like Succession, but I feel like she was in a recent big TV series where she was playing a dramatic role. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, now I'm like super curious, and I should have just done the digging. I was doing all the research at once, and I didn't want to go down a rabbit hole, but now I want to. So anyway, we'll come back to it. But Paul Rudd, obviously, was in this as well, of many, many things, as we know. But recently, of course, Ant-Man fame, but also done I Love You, Man, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Knocked Up, a lot of those like Judd Apatow kind of like comedies and things like that.
And going all the way back to like Clueless, too.
Yeah, Clueless, we got it, which we covered, as we know. And he looks exactly the same, you know.
Every movie.
Every single movie.
I saw something where he did an interview and he wasn't sure that he even got paid for this role.
I know.
That's insane. Like he's like the budget was so low and the check was so small that I think they just forgot to pay me, and my accountant didn't bother to look for that small ass number. So I might have never gotten paid for this film.
But I'm also like, who loses their paycheck? Like just forgets about it. Somebody like that's not me and my money is what I'm saying. I'm like, where my money? Like,
yeah.
But yes, I saw that. I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, this was a really surprisingly small budget, but actually I have thoughts about that too. Anyway, we'll get there.
Okay.
Christopher Maloney, who plays Stabler. Guys, like, who doesn't know Stabler? Law and Order, SVU. It's a classic, but that's like the main, literally for like 20 years. That's what this guy was doing. So he hasn't been in a lot of other things.
He played Jesus in Rick and Morty. He was the voice of Jesus Christ. So I thought that was kind of funny.
His range, I'm telling you.
He could play Jesus. He could play a cop. He could play a chef.
He could play a chef. He could also play a colonel in Man of Steel, which is the only other big movie that I found him in. So yeah, but we love a Christopher Maloney. He's great as Stabler. I will die on that hill. He's awesome. Michael Showalter, as we said, The Big Sick. And then he also did recently, but I haven't seen it, The Idea of You. Have you seen that? I haven't
seen much about that one.
Yeah, I just know that there was like some uproar because it was, God forbid, Anne Hathaway with a younger man.
I also like how in this because it's a group of improv actors and character actors that are in this film, the writer is forced to play two very different characters. Like he plays the main character through the whole film, and they're like, you know what? Just put on a wig and a silly mustache and go back out there and play a different old man character at the end of the film as the standard comic.
Yeah, because why not? And I didn't remember that from the first watch. Like I said, I don't remember a lot of that. But while it was happening in this one, I was like, surely we're going to acknowledge this at some point, or get someone else to do it. And I just thought he was going to shift gears. I just don't remember those scenes. And I was like, well, he's just going to go off stage and then it's going to be like he was in a cop. No, he's just straight up two different fucking characters that are wildly different. Okay. Anyway. And then Marguerite Moreau, who I know her personally from Queen of the Damned. And I was I think I said I was like you were what? Werewolves horror movie. I was like vampire kid. I was like a vampire kid. Yeah. So I remember her from that. But then she was also in Mighty Ducks, for example.
Yeah, I remember her from I think she was in all three Mighty Ducks.
I think so.
I think she was the only girl on the team in the first one. And the second one, Julie the Cat, spoiler, joins the team. But first film, just the one girl on the team.
How dare you? We have listeners who haven't seen Mighty Ducks 2.
It's a twist. Goldberg gets a little competition, y'all. It gets crazy in D2.
Goodness. Okay, Elizabeth Banks, who I love, and she is a ridiculous character in this movie, but it's hilarious that she's in here. I totally forgot about that as well. Hunger Games is one of the main things you guys probably know her from, but she also did Pitch Perfect. But she's also a big director. Like she did Lego Movie. She's done a lot of work, but she transitioned pretty deliberately into directing and is I think a very strong director. Actually, I like a lot of her stuff. So
she's done a lot of good stuff. She and Paul Rudd were actually the stars of Role Models. Well, Sean William Scott was in there too, but so the two of them would go on to be in David Wayne's other film Role Models. And also her name in that one is Beth, and Janine Garofalo in this is Beth. And they use that Kiss song in both movies. It feels like David Wayne is just going through the motions, but I don't know if he's done it in any of his other films. Somebody else needs to report back on that.
Yeah, you guys let us know. Also, the Molly Shannon thing, I think, just popped into my head. She was in Marie Antoinette, which we just talked about.
Yes.
But also, I can't remember. We've talked about this before. I can't remember if you've seen this. I think she's in Promising Young Woman. Have you seen that?
I've seen Promising Young Woman, but I just remember the TV show I was talking about was The White Lotus. She was the one dude's mother in that, but I don't. I saw Promising Young Woman, but I don't remember.
And she's weirdly different in that too. But I like her in that. She's really good at that. Okay, sorry. Again, tangent with Molly Shannon here. Bradley Cooper, who we love, is a gem and did A Star Is Born, as we know, famously remade and directed and performed in A Star Is Born. Can do fucking anything as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Maestro as well, same thing. And of course he got super famous from The Hangover, but I remember him from Alias, like an OG kid. Obvi, loved him before he was cool kind of vibes, but he just
because he was on Alias before this, right? Alias was like late 90s or no? Because this was his film
it was
debut.
around 2000s. It was like I think it was 2000, 2001. So it was around the same time because I think he took if I recall correctly, he took a pause from Alias to film this and then went back, and they had to like kind of work out that schedule. But yeah, it was around the same time, but he wasn't like a big name yet by any means.
Yeah. So this is his film debut in 2001, and I just think and I'm sure you have Amy Poehler next because they're sort of a tag team in this.
Yeah.
The two of them playing like the theater kids essentially are doing a perfect job. As a former theater teacher of being that, when you would go to like competitions and stuff and you'd see some of the other theater teachers that are just taking the performances of their 12-year-olds way too seriously, That's
Listen, it
them
gives
to
me
a T.
PTSD because I was a theater kid and I had these directors and teachers, and we had a very strong, very serious theater program, and
Uh-huh.
they were. This is a satirical version of my actual directors, is all I'm saying. It was very intense, but their version is obviously much funnier. And yes, Amy Poehler was my next note. SNL, obviously. Parks and Rec, obviously.
Mhm.
Leslie Knope, Queen. Inside Out, which obviously is kind of relevant right now because Inside
Yeah,
Out
the
2
second one just
is
came out.
out. So she's doing that. And then also her and Tina Fey and Baby Mama. And then they did another one together later that I can't remember the name of, but it's like sisters or something like they play sisters and anyway, they're just hilarious
Yeah, I
together. I
think they're
love
like
them.
IRL besties or something, right? The two of
Oh
them?
yeah, they came
Yeah.
up together and they were in the same Chicago improv group actually, whose name escapes me at the moment, but
I think
also like
that's the trick,
similar.
Mackenzie. Just join a fucking improv group in a big city, and then you'll
Yeah.
just get paydays from all your friends. It only takes one of you to get famous, and then you bring everybody else with you,
One of
apparently.
your homies will hook
Yeah.
you up 100%. That's actually very true. There's a lot of these folks that have done that. Like a bunch of the Brooklyn Nine-Nine folks, that's how they
Mhm.
also got those gigs as well. So, yeah, now we know. Now we know. So those are kind of the high level folks. There's definitely more again, like I said, but those are the ones you would probably remember like right now out in the world potentially. I'll give you a quick plot summary, very simple. Set on the last day of camp in the hot summer of 1981, a group of counselors tried to complete their unfinished business before the day ends. They do a lot in this day. Like, this is an
And I think
intense
that's
day.
part of the joke. They sort of make reference to that later in the film of these
Mhm.
characters like falling in love over the course of 12 hours. It's yeah.
Yeah, ridiculous. But yeah, production notes for you. One, the budget. So the budget was 1.8 million, which I know they are saying, and everyone would probably agree, is low. For what came out of it, I'm like, where did you spend it? I have so many questions. I feel like that is more than enough money to put out this production, but it only made $295,206 at the box office. I think that is the
Mhm.
lowest one we've done so far by a wide margin, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that if you could try to cut together again in 2001, I could try and cut together a trailer of what makes this film appealing, but I still don't think it's going to land in 2001. That style of humor was just not hitting yet.
I
This is
also
like
don't know
South
how
Park
you.
just got big, Crank Yankers is on Comedy Set. Like that's what people liked at that time, not so much
Mm,
the dry sketch comedy type feel.
yeah, I also don't know. I mean, and I mean this like not to roast this film. I don't know how you would cut this and get the point across and get the jokes across
Yeah.
in a trailer in a way that's enticing even right now when that humor will be better received. I think this is genuinely kind of hard to tease out, right? Like I just from
Yeah.
watch the rewatch, I don't know how you would do that. So,
That's my big critique of the film. As I said, it's not perfect. It made me laugh, but it's not a perfect movie. And I think my big critique is that it feels like a bunch of sketch comedy things thrown together. And then the last 30 or 40 minutes, they try to give it sort of a closing story arc of like the
mhm,
conflict that's in play. But
mhm.
I think it's more fun when you're just watching it as sketch comedy. But of course, some bits don't land. It's just like watching an episode of SNL. Some bits aren't going to land, some are going to be great. And then they sort of have to force in this plot of like the asteroid and the talent show and all this stuff, and that stuff just kind of falls apart to me. So it's much better when you just watch it as separate moments, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's too much at once. We'll definitely anyway, we'll get into that in a second. But my last production note, this fucker premiered at Sundance. Like
Wow.
at Sundance, even in 2001, and like, Sundance being like, we want avant garde or new or things that are maybe not of the time. Like, I get it, but I'm still just like, Sundance? Really? This was where okay. Okay. I thought that was a little prestigious for this film, is all I'm saying. Just a little bit highbrow for them. But
Fair.
hey, it's where they premiere. Good for them. Didn't turn out to win them any distribution though. Like, they did not get a distribution deal out of that. They ended up the distribution deal that they did end up getting, like, wouldn't pay out the actual filmmakers. And they still
Oh.
took the deal. Like, so the actual investors of the film, or like the director and the writer, I think, were originally going to be paid out. And then they were like, no, they won't be paid out royalties with this deal. It'll just be the investors that get paid back. And they were like, whatever, we have no distribution, please. And then
That's
it
a bummer.
premiered in only like 30 theaters. That's why I made no money. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. But before we get into all of our thoughts, what's your, like, you said you had a good time, you overall liked it, you definitely get it better. What else?
Yeah, I'd say it's an enjoyable it's a fun film. I could see I hadn't rewatched it in 20 years, but now I could see myself sitting down and watching this again in a year or two and like having another laugh at it. But as again, we'll talk about some of the shortcomings of it. I already mentioned one of them. So I
Yeah.
think I'd give it like a 7. It's not a bad film to me. It's worth it for if you need this kind of dry comedy and that's your style of humor, you're going to have a great time. It's like a shittier version of Anchorman. Like I think Anchorman is a chaotic bunch of moments strung together in sequence that turned out perfect. This is trying to kind of do that of just these wacky characters, but it's so disjointed with like Molly Shannon's plot feels so removed from like she doesn't interact with any other characters until
Nobody
the
else.
very end. So that to me, I was like, this just feels forced in here to get another 10 minutes of plot quote unquote. So to me, I'm going to give it like a 7. I don't want to be too critical, and it sounds like I am being critical. So I'm just going to stop there and say 7.
That's a pretty nice rating for feeling like you're being critical. So, I mean, I think that's more than you're still telling people to watch it ultimately. Yeah, I just feel like, I don't know, maybe I needed to go into it with a different mindset because, again, I hadn't seen it in a while and I couldn't really remember the point of it. If I had gone into it like, this is satire, this is an over exaggeration of this situation, then maybe I would be like, I don't know, more open-minded. But I was just not sure what to expect. And I definitely agree with the assessment that it's a bunch of disjointed moments that don't make sense together in their entirety. Like parts of them sort of go together, but parts of them definitely don't. I feel like certain things are just, even taking into account the satire and the hyperbole of it all, just there's definitely some stuff that's over the top for me.
Yeah.
And there's definitely some stuff that just doesn't hold up as far
Okay.
as like appropriateness for me. Like the Molly Shannon storyline, for example, is like a little wild to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't love it. It definitely gets some laughs. Like there are one-liner laughs. There are vignettes that, yes, are funny. Like you said, there are moments that I'm like, cool, this segment is good. This scene is good. But on the whole, yeah, I don't enjoy the movie. Like I would not go back and rewatch it. No. So I think like 5 out of 10
Okay.
is probably where I'm at.
I think that's fair. And I guess if there is somebody like anybody out there that's listening, still trying to make up their mind of whether or not to see it, my advice would be like, I mean, you've heard both of us, so you've probably already made up your mind, but if you do decide to watch it, I would go in with that foresight
I think
of
the
knowing
mindset takes,
it's basically it's meant to be ridiculous and silly and not taken seriously. So I think if you go in with that, it didn't click with me this watch through until about 20 minutes in. And I was like, oh, this is like they're doing all these goofy bits. And it's very reminiscent of those.
But
80s
it took
and
a minute
90s
to click, right?
slapstick.
And that's that's the thing is I
Mhm.
agree. I think going into it makes the difference because it was like 20 minutes in before you're like, oh, this is intentional, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, fair, assessments. I think if you do watch it again, maybe that will really help change, kind of starting from that mindset. But like, let's dig into the weirdness that is this film. So,
Yeah.
high level, as we know, it is the last day of summer camp in 1981, folks, which I think in and of itself gives us a lot of context, right? Like, parents don't give a fuck. Older kids don't give a fuck. These camp counselors sure as shit don't give a fuck. Basically, kids are free to do whatever the hell they want. That's the moral of the story. And so are the camp counselors. They're like 16 years old, in charge of a bunch of, maybe 12 and 13-year-olds and younger. They're not that much older. And it just reminded me of babysitting. Like, I don't know if you as a dude ever did this. I realize it's not as common for
I did
boys
babysit.
to have
Yeah.
babysat. Okay. Well, definitely, like when I babysat, they were a couple years younger than me. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
like a slightly older kid. And John Mulaney has a great skit about this where this girl is 2 years older than him babysitting. He's like, what was the point of her? She can just dial the phone a little better than me. Like, what? I don't understand. This very much gave me that vibe of like, this is a really bad babysitting situation.
And I think that's partially intentional. I think most of the things in this film where you question the logic can be chalked up to, oh, it's very intentional because of the fact that clearly all the counselors are not 17 years old. They're like mid to late 20s at this point
Right.
in their careers. And then the fact that they like a decade later came back and did a prequel with the same actors where they're now 10 years older than they were when they were
Yeah.
already too old to play these roles. I think that tells you that's sort of meant to be silly. I also wonder, when you talk about the budget, maybe it has something to do with child actors. Like maybe it's just they couldn't spend the money to get kids at a certain age. Or that's just a theory. I have no idea if there's anything behind that, but
Maybe. Who knows? But I do think that, yeah, I think that is intentional. Like you said, I think that's supposed to be part of the vibe. Not only that they seem older, the actors, but that there isn't a big age difference between all the kids here, basically. And there's definitely not a big maturity age difference here,
right.
because the people who are supposed to be in charge of watching these people are just as much of a mess.
Yeah.
Like even the camp director is a mess, right? And I just remember on my first note, I was like, man, I forgot how many big people are in this. Like that was a big part of the experience when watching this, is going through every phase where you're like, oh my God, there's so-and-so. Oh my God, there's so-and-so. They just keep popping up at you. It's kind of hilarious. But I felt like it gave off, again, not having been to summer camp, very summer campy kind of vibes of like what you think summer camp will be like, the boys sneaking out right at the beginning of like there's like 12 boys in the girls' cabin, all under their covers fooling around, and they all sneak out in unison. And I was like, I feel like something very close to this happens at camp.
It's probably exaggerated, but I like that they do this sort of walk of shame scene, and the counselors are just sitting there and no one gives a fuck. No one cares.
Beth is sitting there sipping her coffee, just chilling. And I love that she yells. I can't even remember exactly what she yells, but it was just like, you're not supposed to be out of your bunks. You're in trouble. And it just makes no move to get off the steps. Just keeps sipping her coffee. Does not give a shit. It's pretty early in the morning, you can tell. And I just am like, okay. So there's no supervision here, is what we're learning.
Yeah, it sets the tone of just sort of the ridiculousness of this film and how nothing should be taken seriously. I love some of the early dialogue that, again, just said there's a lot of styles of humor in this, but I like the absurdity, especially of David Hyde Pierce at the beginning when Beth is talking to his character and like, hey, you should come and teach science for the kids. And he's like, oh, no, I couldn't possibly. She's like, no, it'll be fun. Oh, no, I'm not. And then she's tricked. I said no. Like his yell there. That just
it is at 1,000. And I was like, I mean, I like that she walks away. She kind of doesn't try to salvage it. Thank goodness. But I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? And then, of course, if you follow their story to its conclusion here over this film, you're just like, he screamed at you the first time. In the first minute you met, he screamed at you. He is not okay.
Again, it's meant to be this total absurdity of you're being polite. And then he just goes to 1,000, like you said, of just
100%.
screaming. It's like totally over the top. And then there's this classic line that I feel like still gets quoted to this day of a guy saying to a girl, I want you inside me. Like that line still to this day, I hear people saying that in a humorous way. So that one, I was like, oh yeah, that's from this film. I completely forgot about that.
And I just love that he like just pseudo yells it after her. Yeah. Like she's walking away and he just sort of pseudo yells after her. And you're like, is that what you physically couldn't control yourself? Like it was just, and that's Showalter, right? Like that's his character. Yep. And so, yeah, I did remember that was funny. And I'm also like, she's like, what did you say? I'm like, bitch, you heard that. You 100% heard what he just said. But yeah, I also really like, before we get too far past it, I thought it was so cute, the little like radio announcer kid who is not hooked up to anything.
They wait until like half an hour in the movie to show you that he's just we're hearing him narrate, but no one outside of his box
is hearing him. Yeah. It is super just him. And I just love that he gives them the nugget of like, if you want to hear me in the future after camp, listen to me at blah, 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 Jewish day school radio. And then of course you see that he's not hooked up to stuff. You're like, do you really have a radio station? Like it was just so cute. And he's the one who doesn't shower. So like he's got a whole situation going on. And there is always that kid, by the way, really quick before we move on, the stinky kid in school. I don't care if it's camp, whatever. There is always one of those kids that you're like, please shove him in the shower. Please
and look,
do it.
I worked in a middle school. I know that kids are going through changes and a lot of them aren't aware of it yet. Right. And it's hormones and all these things happening. But there are my younger brother, when he was just didn't want to brush his teeth, didn't want to shower. It was just like a hassle for him. So like, Chase, I'm sorry that I'm calling you out on this.
Roasted, called
for a year or two, he was the smelly kid because he just would be outside all day, but he never wanted to shower. So I get it.
I wasn't like that at this age, but I will say when I was younger, I was very bad at that. When I was like, 8, 9, 10, I was like, I'm just outside all the time. What does it matter? I'm just going to get gross. Right. Like I
Mhm.
was just I was an outside kid and I was just like, I don't have time for this. I'm busy. I'm doing other things. I'm in trees. I'm riding bikes. I'm doing, I was just gross. But yeah, there is, I think, a shift like as you hit puberty though, that you're like, oh shit,
I
I can
wanna
smell
be
myself. Like,
attractive to the people that I'm attracted to.
right. I look like crap. I smell a little gross.
Yeah.
Like it's time to shower. Like this kid has not had this shift yet for sure.
Now did you pick up on, 'cause I didn't, Janelle actually caught this, but did you pick up on the extra, I guess, actor that's helping play this role?
For the boy who does the
Yeah.
radio? I
So
did
the
not.
radio voice is not that actor. It's actually Sam Levine, who was on Freaks and Geeks, and he actually had a really small
That's why
part.
she knew that. She was like
Yes,
freaks and
she
geeks.
loves Freaks and Geeks. And he has such a great radio voice, but I'm like, why didn't they just cast him to be this kid? I don't know
Yeah.
because I don't even know if he's credited, but it's
Wouldn't he
definitely
be
him.
around the same age even at
Yeah.
that time?
He
Like,
might have even been younger than that kid. Maybe that had something to do with it.
yeah, that's interesting. I don't know why they wouldn't just cast him. But no, I did not catch that. I hope there's some more Easter eggs like that I
I saw
missed that
this
I
like
get
a
to learn
week
today.
ago, and I can't remember if he actually gets a credit or if he's just thanked at the end, like thanks to so and so. But I don't know if he actually gets credited as like being the voice of the radio.
Yeah, I think like maybe it's just a like thanks for popping in for a quick second. Who knows,
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows how we used that footage that you recorded for us? Maybe it makes the cut, maybe it
That
doesn't.
you def did for free because budget. We didn't even pay Paul Rudd, So you're definitely not getting credited or paid.
And speaking of the voices, I love H. John Benjamin as the can of vegetables, who now has
Mm,
like one of the most famous voices in TV and film because he's on Archer and Bob's Burgers, and
yeah.
he just has that distinct. But in this, he's just playing a can of vegetables.
Doesn't the can of vegetables kind of creep you out? At least
I
to
think he
me,
has the perfect voice for it because H. John Benjamin always does the same exact voice because it is so distinct, but he puts like little tweaks depending on if he's playing a sexy spy or a chef at a burger restaurant or in this case, a
yeah.
can of vegetables. And he does sort of like this slow, creepy, sexual drawl that is very, and it's all coming from this chef's brain anyway and his whatever's going on in there. But yeah, I hear you.
And I get it. Like he's saying creepy things. So of course that's probably what makes it creepy. But definitely I rewatched this and I was like, oh, I forgot about this can. I'm so like, oh, I itch. Okay. Anyway, yeah. But okay, so a couple quick things about Marguerite Moreau's character, whose name I can't remember. Katie? Katie?
Katie, yes.
Katie. When her and Paul Rudd's character, same thing, Andy? Andy? Whatever.
Yes, Andy.
So they have their first makeout on screen, and
Hmm.
again, the hyperbole of it all, but oh my God, it is so uncomfortable to watch. And their tongues are just out a fucking mile. And this is how you know you're old, right? I'm 35 years old and I'm like, okay, this is me, the adult in the room. Like, this is the example you're setting for these children. Like, I have never felt so old watching a movie. I'm like, these kids with their tongues out, making out. But it
Yeah.
really is really difficult to watch. I'm not going to lie.
I wrote down so much Paul Rudd tongue in this. Like his tongue is just
Mhm.
out and about throughout this film. And again, it is meant to be absurd. The whole point is that his entire character is over the top. So the way that he makes out with people is going to be over the top. I didn't know that. I found this out on like IMDb. But if there are any wrestling fans listening, there's a guy in AEW named Orange Cassidy. And his entire persona is this guy who doesn't really give a shit. He'll like come out to the ring and wrestle a match with his hands in his pockets, his denim jeans the whole time. Like he'll fight with his hands in his pockets and he's so nonchalant. And he's come out and said, yeah, I based my character on this Paul Rudd character in Wet Hot American Summer. He's just
Oh,
got denim
yeah.
jacket, walks out, doesn't care. And I just love how Paul Rudd in this embraces the over the top silliness of his character.
I have two comments here.
Let's hear it.
One, fam, audience, I need y'all to keep a running count of the number of times Lemar, one, brings up wrestling, two, mentions Hot Topic. Go. All right. You have them
Hot
tasked.
Topic's definitely winning, but wrestling's
Hot-
unique. It doesn't help that we did an Iron Claw episode.
Yeah,
So
you can make whatever excuse you want. They come up a lot. So that's my one comment. But two, oh my God, I do love Paul Rudd's character in this while also simultaneously hating him
yeah.
because one, he's awful, but also he's so different than Paul Rudd and everything else. That is actually the thing
He's
I think I
actually
enjoy about
hateable in this.
he's
Yeah.
actually hateable. And you're like, I forgot that you could even hate Paul Rudd in
Right.
any capacity. And you're like, oh no, he's the fucking worst. But it's so rare for him that it's like a nice, I don't know, departure. Fun to
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we got to get to speaking of the can of vegetables and the weird things it was saying. It was saying it to the fucking chef, who is Christopher Maloney's character, who I love in a lot of ways, other than his weird proclivities, of course. But he is such a stereotype, like such a vibe in this
Yeah.
movie of the like Vietnam vet who came back kind of fucked up. But they make
Yep.
him a little bit more wholesome than like that could go much darker, is what I'm saying, I guess.
I think
but
it felt like they were going to that dark place for the first half, and you're like, oh, I don't think this has aged well, because now like we're a lot more conscious of
Yes.
soldiers coming back from war and the things that they saw and how that affects them. But I do think, yeah, and when he learns to just sort of embrace, and again, they're not saying that this is, but it is a sketch comedy-esque movie, so of course he's going to do something ridiculous like hump a fridge. But when he finally embraces and becomes okay with who he is, and the camp like is like, yeah, okay, sure, it's fine.
I know, and but he's kind of funny throughout, and I love that it's almost like the yelling the "I want to be inside you" or "I want you inside me"
I want you
quote.
inside me.
I want you inside me quote, because he says these things under his breath, but not. Like he is definitely straight up talking to you on multiple occasions, and he's like, "What did you just say?" And you're like, "Number one, bitch, you heard it." Two, he like switches and is like, "Nothing. I said whatever. This other thing," and you're just like, do you guys not know how to whisper? Has nobody learned to whisper in this fucking camp? And yeah, he just says some weird shit, but I just love his bandana, his cutoff, his whole energy is just funny. And every time he enters or exits a scene, for me at least, he kind of steals that scene for sure. Even though it's weird every time, he definitely steals the scene. And the fridge thing was so weird, and like the slow hump, it's not even it's almost worse, I don't know. It was
You know what? I'm going to change my theory from earlier. It wasn't that they didn't have kids because of budget. It's because they realized how fucked up everything that the kids would be seeing was going to be. They're like, we can't have shit. I didn't even write this fact down, but I remember seeing something about how the person who owned this campground that rented the property for filming the movie thought it was going to be like a family-friendly picture. And then they saw the final product and were pissed, which like, I get it if that's what you're expecting.
I think they even like wrote the investors of the production and asked them to not release the film or recut the film or something like that because they were so pissed. But I mean,
do you know where this was filmed? Was this in New Jersey? I feel like a lot of campground ones get filmed in Jersey.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was Jersey. I thought it was New York.
Yeah, I feel like it's always in the Northeast up there. So
yeah, I think it was like Catskills-esque. You know what I mean? But I don't know the exact location. But I thought it was New York. But I do know that it rained most of this shoot, so it's kind of shocking that they were able to even get it done. It was like literally, I think it was like 23 days, and it was a 28-day shoot or something, and it rained the entire time.
I was going to say, because Janelle and I noticed you could see their breath in a few of the shots, and I'm like, oh, it must be really cold, and they're wearing like cutoffs and denim. Like, yeah, that that so it wasn't a wet, hot American summer.
It was not. It was ironic. A wet, cool summer. Yeah, and I think they had to have edited the footage a good amount because it's pretty bright, for having rained the whole damn time. So I don't know, but yeah, it was a little bit of a production issue, but they got it done. So I don't know. But one of the things I also really, going back to Andy's character really quick before I forget, he is, I think, maybe the first really overt iteration of a fuckboy that we've ever seen.
You might be 110% right.
You know what I mean? Like we are seeing, like it is emblematic. He is documented for us, like teaching us what to avoid as women. Women, if you want to see how not to be treated, this is the guy. He calls her a dyke. He tells her, fuck you. They get into a fight. She asks if they're soulmates, and he's like, sure, if you want. He is straight fuckboy for sure. Not to mention the cheating that happens later. But
you taste like a burger. I don't love you anymore.
I know. Oh my God.
And actually, I thought you were 110% right, but actually, I think the first fuckboy is Shaggy from the Scooby-Doo series. I think if you go back and rewatch that, you might be corrected, but otherwise, I think you're 100% correct.
Yeah, if we eliminate Shaggy, maybe that's probably accurate. But yeah, I just, again, so different for Paul Rudd. I love it. But he does go just like make out with another girl. And that was another moment for me that was kind of alarming. I was like, oh, okay. And it's also just out in the open. You're not really hiding it. He's on the dock swimming. Like, who's to say she won't walk
I
past
still
you?
think you are trying to consume this movie as if the plot has to make any kind of sense.
You're
I
right.
think
You're
that
totally right.
you
You're
have
totally
to
right.
remember that every character in this, I would assume the actor was told, hey, just take this and take it straight to fucking 11. And they told Paul Rudd, your
Yeah.
character doesn't give a shit about anything. So it makes total sense that he would be cheating right in front of his girl where everyone could see it, that he lets a kid die on his watch,
Yeah.
like multiple
Yeah.
kids die because they're at this summer camp and he doesn't give a fuck.
You're so right, because I'll just give you guys a quick teaser trailer of my notes that are all me watching this sincerely, right? Which is like, who's watching the kids? This is a bunch of underage children exposed to this. Who's watching the kids? Again, that's a separate note, just so you know. These 80s kids' parents, they don't give a fuck. Look at all these crimes they're committing. Why? Where? Where are the police?
I
Like,
do think
this is just me watching it as a straight film. And
you're
I'm just
watching
like,
this as a documentary, like a true life. That's because even two of the characters that we haven't even mentioned yet, which were Ken Marino and Joe Latruglio, who I knew from like Party Down and Brooke, you mentioned Brooklyn Nine-Nine earlier. Those two are kind of off on their own subplot where he's trying to leave the canoeing trip and come back and hook up with this girl who's hooking up with everybody else but him at that
yeah,
point.
yeah.
And at one point, like they both just leave the kids in the canoe and run off.
I know.
And then
He's
they have
like,
to be
we won't
rescued.
survive without him. Cool. Let me just also jump out of the canoe and
Yeah.
abandon you, or the raft and abandon you. And I definitely was watching that like, okay, cool. The kids are going to die now. That seems great. That seems like a good plan. Yeah, I definitely watch it like a documentary is my takeaway for sure.
Yeah, there was one specific, I keep coming back to just the different styles of humor in this, and there was one very specific airplane Naked Gun-esque moment that I was like, okay, now it's, if I didn't believe it before, I believe it now, which is when they're doing, I forget if they're playing Capture the Flag or what, but they're all running in slow motion and out of nowhere, an Olympian sprinter is in the mix and like running next to them. Like that's the kind of absurd shit that I remember from those comedies back in the day. So
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of absurd, transitioning to what I think one of the more absurd sequences is their day trip to the town, because Beth is like, I need to get some, I need to get some supplies basically for my, love of my life here.
mhm.
And also her nurse is like, I need lube. So she like runs and she's gonna go into town, whatever. So everyone, of course, is like, oh, let's all abandon ship and nobody will watch the children while we go into town. And the majority of the counselors go into town and they proceed to do, again, all the crimes. Like I said, they commit every crime that they can think
They rob
of.
an old woman, they're getting drunk, they're doing heroin and like blacking out, but somehow,
Blacking
like
out.
you said, they get back in the same day and are totally fine.
It's
And
like
again,
2
it's
hours.
played
It's
for
like
a
a lunch
joke.
break.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like, we're going to take a lunch break, run a quick errand, get blown out of our minds on heroin in a crack house, and then we're going to just refresh ourselves and go back and we're going to be totally sober.
Yeah, it's that hard right turn of some dark comedy where it's a stereotypical thing like, oh, let's go into town, let's get out of the camp for a day, and you think they're just trying to get away from the kids, and then all these things, fucked up things happen. I love it when comedy sort of does that and like subverts your expectations. So I don't know, that one landed for me.
That one did make me laugh, I will say. Like that sequence, it's just absurd, but it did make me laugh because that one is, I guess, again, like we said, it takes like 20 plus minutes to figure out that this is all played for laughs. And so like, but that one is the most overt moment that you're just like, I cannot accept this as any form of reality. So I'm just gonna laugh. So yeah, I totally agree. I think that one kind of lands. And I love that she comes back and her hair, for example, looks exactly the same, and she's supposed to be, getting dolled up for this guy, and her outfit's exactly the
Mhm.
same, and like nothing has changed at all. And Katie comes back and tries to tell Andy about her awesome day in town, and he like doesn't listen to her, doesn't give a fuck, walks off. And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
so nothing changed. This little vignette that happened, nothing changed.
No, this movie has a lot. I think that something that I appreciate is when you can make jokes that are not just words in a script. Like, I think it's one thing to write a funny joke and to have a line be delivered, but I think this movie does a good job of having things happening in the background or things that
Right.
are not called direct attention to There's
Yeah.
one random thing that is such a fun. I think it's right when they get back from town and they get out of the truck and all the guys are peeing and up against a wall and Coop is talking to Katie, I think, and then she walks away and he's like, "Guys, wait up!" And he turns around to go pee with all the guys up against the wall. It's this
Mhm.
tiny fucking thing, but he walks too fast and like hits the wall gently, just hits his head on the like a. It's so fucking stupid, but to me, I'm like, he didn't have to do that. They don't call attention to it, but he just goes, "Oh," and then it cuts to the next scene. Or the baseball scene, which again is meant to be making fun of like, guys, we've been working all season. We were
Yeah.
the underdogs. And he tells the whole
You
story
can
that you've
do
seen in
it, you know, the amp
every
up scene.
sports
Yeah.
movie. And he's like, but we want to make sure we're losing. And then we want to come back at the end. And they have a discussion about how sort of forced it is. And he's like, do we really have to? No, you guys don't want to do this. And then they have him walk away, like far back in the frame. You can't even hear what he's saying, but he's talking to the other team's coach. And you assume they're having this convo of like, hey, we don't really want to play. Yeah, it's a little forced. Okay, bye. And they just leave.
I definitely read that whole conversation because I watch everything with subtitles. It's 100% that conversation. And he like does not give a fuck either. Like that's my favorite part is the other team and the other camp that we have no insight into is just also like, cool. Like we don't care. Just leaves. And yeah, so you know, all of these summer camps are apparently the same at this time. They do not care. They do not care. Ugh. I do really like how they work in the other storylines that Katie and what's his name?
Andy?
Andy, the other
Coop?
boy, the other guy who like
Coop.
Coop, where like they are slowly coming together. Like she's flirting with him and she's being kind of a hoe. I didn't love that at the very beginning where she's kind of teasing him and making fun of him for liking her. And I'm like, oh, the arrogance is gross. But then she like seems to be flirting with him and all that. But then they get to the scene of them in the like the little goat pen and the like sweater shirt situation
Swapping.
back and forth. And he's like, no, I'm kind of cold. Like, can I have it back? And she's like, right now? Like, he's like, yep. And they switch back. And you're just like, what is happening? And then they make out. What I have taken away from this is this girl, while confident, has no self-esteem. Like, I'm like,
no. And I mean, that's indicated by her entire final monologue, right? Of like, I'm going to go be with Andy because he's hot and I'm 16. And I love that on the nose. Like, let's explain how this would work in real life in most cases.
Right.
She's not going to go with the dorky guy that's been drooling over her all summer, right?
100%. 100%. And then I think I want to touch on two other stories because again, they're also disjointed that I really think of them as different stories. But so I have two that I want to touch on. One is the Molly Shannon, Aaron kid conversation because we have to acknowledge that. Like one, again, that doesn't fucking hold up. It is on its face as a concept kind of funny that this woman is having obviously has a terrible relationship with her ex-husband who is leaving her and she's heartbroken and these kids like build her up. You know, like that's kind of a cute-ish funny thing of, hey, these kids are like, you deserve better, pumping her up, telling her she's great, she's a great teacher, blah, blah, blah. That's kind of cute. But there's definitely this central character, Aaron, who is really rooting for her. And weirdly, you can tell early on that there's supposed to be a vibe there. And I'm like, creeped. I'm like, I should not be aware of a vibe. This is gross. Like, this weirds me out.
It's one of those jokes. And I think comedy, I'm not going to say good comedy, but I think comedy in general, sometimes its job is to like walk up to a line of like, how uncomfortable can we make you, but still get you to kind of find something funny or laugh. And obviously when you do that, it's not going to land a portion of your audience is going to be like, what the fuck are you doing right now? So I too was watching this and kind of like, I don't love this, but I'm glad. I mean, it does end with that sort of absurd joke of we're getting married, or I forget what they say at the very end.
No, they literally are getting married. Like they are going home and getting married. They invite these other folks to their wedding. And apparently there was actually supposed to be a scene where they kiss. At the talent show where she rejects her husband in front of everyone, Aaron and her are supposed to kiss. That kid was 12 years. That kid was 12 years old and he was visibly uncomfortable with that situation. And his parents and the filmmakers were like, oh, I guess if he's uncomfortable, like they were still going to make him do it. And I'm like, if I'm that kid's parent, I am not having him kiss 30-year-old Molly Shannon. That is so fucking weird. And thank God they didn't because he was uncomfortable. He did not want to do it because why would you? But that was in the script. And that's the kind of thing that I'm like, that doesn't hold up. That's not funny. I don't think that's funny anymore. Because as soon as, like you said, if you want to walk up to a lion and test the waters, that's one thing. That to me is over the line. Like, you
Yeah.
don't make this little kid kiss this grown ass
Yeah,
woman.
I think they made the right decision because I think having them say, "We're getting married, you're all invited," it's still
Mhm.
super inappropriate, but in the real life connotations of it, it's much more okay, I guess. Not within the
Yeah.
confines of the film, but for these two actors, it's much funnier to have them say, "I'm marrying a child." Still
Mhm.
fucked up, but I can
Yeah.
see how it's funny in an environment like this one.
Yeah, I was just disappointed that it took the kid being uncomfortable for that to get adjusted.
Yeah,
But
IRL,
I'm
that's pretty
glad.
fucked up.
Yeah, but I am glad that it happened. And I will say, flip side, the other story I wanted to touch on was the homosexual couple that we see in this film that is, in
Mhm,
fact, kind of adorable
mhm.
and overall does kind of hold up because you think early on that they're not going to be accepted because they have the scene where they go have this like symbolic wedding at the lake
Mhm.
and Beth is marrying them. And this is Bradley Cooper's character. And I can't remember their names, but that
Michael Ian Black, who to
Michael
this
Ian Black.
day, Bradley Cooper will say that Michael Ian Black is his best on-screen kiss. So
Listen, it was a hot scene. I
yeah,
don't care. I don't care which way you swing.
yeah.
There are good sex scenes and there are good sex scenes, and this was one. They were adorable as a couple. I like that they have their cute little wedding, but they get caught and seen by some of the other counselors who use the anti-gay F word that I won't say,
Yeah.
and you think it's not
He's like, we
gonna be
gotta do
good.
something. He's like, we gotta do something.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels like it's going to be bad, and then come to find out, flash forward, they come in with a giant crate and barrel, which by the way, pricey, sofa gift for them. And they're
Yeah.
like 100%. We are so happy for
Yeah.
you.
This is for you. It's a chase lounge.
It's a cheese lodge. And I was like, this is one so gay. Like, what a gay gift. I loved it. And so affirming. And so, yeah, that was a pleasant surprise. Other than the language they use, very pleasant surprise.
Well, now I own a chase lounge, so
Well, we'll talk about it later. It's
okay.
okay.
Maybe this is a discussion.
Not
I
a
had
big
no
deal.
idea. But yeah, there's like I want to call out. I keep coming back to the fact that I'll say right now, the last 30 minutes of this film is the worst part of the movie. I think it
Mhm.
starts with like the sort of montage training scene, which to that point had already been parodied to death in so many other like
Yeah, over
satirical
it.
films.
Didn't
It's
care.
like, okay, we don't need a training montage just to learn the moves of being a badass for this girl you want to impress. But that happens. There's the weird thing with the asteroid, and oh, we need to have some kind of conflict. And they do weave them together of but again, it's so fucking random because there's the talent show and there's the kid who just
Yeah.
controls the wind. I don't love the nerdy kid storyline where he's like
No.
picked on the whole thing and then he gets up and makes wind and then it's like, oh, did he affect the asteroid thing fall? It's dumb as hell. We don't need
It
that
also
sort of
gets like,
coherent plot in this film.
yeah, I don't know. It gets a little, I don't want to say paranormal, but you know what I mean. It's like a little, it's a little switching genres for me. I'm like, okay, what the
Mhm.
fuck? And I
Yeah.
agree. I actually wish that the asteroid storyline would have been his astrophysicist character being wrong. Like that would have been so much
Ah.
more interesting to me and funnier actually of like he gets everybody on high fucking alert and we all have to save the day and then like nothing fucking happens. I feel like that would have been more fitting than
Right.
he turns out to be totally right and they save the day and the wind thing or whatever. Yeah, I totally agree. I thought it was bullshit. And I was like, this
Yeah.
could have been funnier, I think, actually.
I agree. And I want to say, just in case any big fans of Wet Hot American Summer are listening and mad at me, I know it's not an asteroid. It's like a piece of a space station or something. It's either way.
Skylab
Skylab.
satellite. Yeah, it's falling.
Okay. But spinning off of that, because we have that plot line, I think aside from the nerdy kid with the random wind thing, I do think the talent show sequence is pretty fun. I
That is
like how
fun.
they're each doing their own thing.
I like the MC, like we said.
The
It was
MC is
funny.
very, and it's
So funny.
it's not funny in itself. If you just had that
No.
in the script, again, it's not. But the fact that everyone is dying at laughter at his terrible jokes
Yeah.
makes you eventually start laughing at his terrible jokes
Yeah.
because they're going all in on it. So I dug
Sometimes
that.
it takes an audience, man. You know what I mean? And like if
Mhm.
the audience is laughing, you can laugh too. And that's definitely the energy of that scene.
Totally agree. And then the only other part there I wanted to call out was I love when they put on that incredible performance and everyone's clapping along and really excited, but then when the song ends, they all boo the shit out of them.
I know.
I love the silliness of that.
The roast of Godspell is pretty harsh, I gotta
Yeah.
say. I was like, Godspell is an excellent musical.
Yeah.
Victor Garber was a gem. Let's be respectful, okay? But no, they did a great job, and they're just like roasting the shit out of them. I was like, this is every theater kid's nightmare. Is the other thing is like I'm just sitting there, just holding my breath for these poor kids because yeah, you just are waiting to be booed someday. It's horrible.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I think overall, for me, very funny film, like a film that I can watch and pay attention in and out of, but get some laughs out of and not really be super invested in the plot. There's a couple parts that drag and a couple jokes that don't land. But for the most part, I think it's an enjoyable flick that I'll probably watch again.
I definitely will not watch it again, but there were funny parts. There are funny parts. I don't love the ending that much. I don't think it ends super strong, but I will say it has kind of an 80s, not Breakfast Club, but that era of film ending vibe that is a fun energy aesthetic or whatever. But the like pregnancy and the write me a letter, but I'm going back to Andy situation and the marrying the 12-year-old, like it just the
pregnancy.
The pregnancy.
When
I was
it's been
like,
a day and he's like, real the way they play it so straightforward. We've been trying over the course of these 12 hours.
It's okay, we can adopt, and I've won this trophy that's already here. That's not even how it whatever. It's that to me is it's not a strong closure, which maybe would make it land better for me. But I wouldn't watch it again, but it has some funny parts. It does have some funny parts. I would.
It's one where you could probably like go to YouTube and search for a couple different scenes and laugh your ass off.
Yeah.
Just like SNL, right? Like everyone remembers the golden days of SNL, but when you go back and watch those episodes in like the late 80s, early 90s, they're not that good. Yeah, there's a lot of stinkers in there. So
you got to get through the shit to get the laughs as well, for sure.
Yes.
All right. Well, Bam, as we said, we watch it. I was a 5 out of 10. Lamar was a 7 out of 10. Are you still a 7 out of 10? Do you think?
I'm still a 7. It is very funny, but that doesn't make a good film, I guess, to me. But it is something.
That's a good way to put it. There's funny parts.
And
yes. Yeah. I think it's a good way to put it. Funny parts, not a great film. I think that's fair.
I mean, for what it's worth, I have 7 or 8 different notes still left on here that we didn't discuss, but they're all just quotes and things I laughed at. So there's a bunch of stuff we didn't even touch. I love the stunt motorcycle rider that's very clearly a stunt rider. They do it with like the hay bale stoppage, but then he gets there and they do a one take where it's him getting off the motorcycle. It cuts away, and when it comes back, it's little Joe Latrulio standing there. I just love, again, the absurdity of it. For some reason, that tickles my funny bone. So...
Well, like we said, go watch it and have some laughs. It's worth a few chuckles here and there. Or I think better yet, take Lamar's suggestion and YouTube the funniest parts of Wet Hot American Summer. But either way, thanks for joining. Come back next week where we're going to continue our summer flick with Moonrise Kingdom. It's a Wes Anderson flick, so very different vibe from this, but I'm excited.
Yeah, dude. And be sure to follow us on our socials. We drink and we watch things. You can also email us if you're one of those people. We drink and we watch things pod@gmail.com. And also follow our buddy Skylar. What's his handle again?
Craft World. We actually just put it in a post. We tagged him in our most recent cocktail post. So feel free to check him out there. But we would also love a review but only if you like it. If not, it's fine. You don't have to say anything. That's okay.
I actually don't give a fuck. If you want to give us 1 star, if you don't like it, fine, go for it. I don't even care.
Okay, well, if you want to incur my wrath, then feel free to do that. But anyway, on that note, go have a drink and watch a thing. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay. All righty. Mark. Well, hello, folks. Welcome back to We Drink and We Watch Things. I'm Mackenzie.
I'm what? God, I'm like choking. Well, that'll be a fun outtake.
I was going to say, is it an outtake or is it the
It was one of those moments where it was one of those moments where something catches in your throat and if you keep talking, you're going to choke to death or So I just had to
I
stop.
could
I was like,
see
nope,
it
nope.
before the sound came out, and then it was
Uh,
so I shouldn't laugh, but it was very funny.
the drink
Okay.
that Skylar gave us has chili flakes in it, and I think one of those caught at the back of my throat. Okay, can we take that again?
Ooh, okay, take two. Here we go.